Welcome to the talk on sandwiches, trash, and doing the little things. So, first talk of the morning, and first talk of the first ever Geek Conference of Equal Experts. No pressure, right? No pressure, Munish. Yeah. All right. So today I'll be sharing some key lessons that we got from a coaching engagement that we were working on some time ago. Uh, Show of hands, who enjoys book reading or book reading sessions? Wow, I got a good audience. So we'll be doing a little bit of book reading, and but I won't take too long. Just a little snippet from a book. So the book is titled "The Theme of Teams." Show of hands. And if you read this book, yeah, cool, awesome. So the book is written by an ex-U.S. Army general, Stanley McChrystal, and he shares some examples of how. The book is specifically about the complexity theory and how we are working in a complex environment, and how we sometimes try to put in place linear solutions to solve complex problems, and why those solutions are not really sufficient. He gives many examples, especially focusing on the Iraq War, and how some of the complexity theories worked over there, and what were their ways of kind of approaching that. So what I'll be talking about today is not necessary. It's not actually about the war, or it's not anything contentious. The story is an anecdote. It's a real story, but we've changed the name. We're using the name Lieutenant Commander Conway, and he was a person serving in the Iraq War, and the story is about him. So a bit of a context before I read a little bit of snippet from this book for you. So the US Army was having an exchange program, and where they used to send their officers or people from the armed forces or departments, and they were getting exchanged between various departments, or sometimes from the Navy you go to some embassies, or sometimes people from the embassies go to another department, let's say in the Navy. And they used to spend that time to transfer knowledge, so what they've learned, what they are learning currently, and spend that time in informing the other people about it, and also kind of seeing if there's any new intelligence that can help them in the current missions that they're working on. So what used to typically happen was, who wants to give away their best people, right? Imagine we're all working in our teams, and somebody said, hey, could you loan a person to us for about 6 months or 3 months? There's a tendency that we try to give a person so that our business, our working doesn't get too much impacted. And that's what was happening when General McChrystal joined and he took the reins. So I'll be starting from there onwards. So he changed the criteria to come up with that LNO, or the liaison officer, who would then go to be a part of the exchange program. Yeah, all clear? So I'll be putting up images of the sections that I'll be reading. So I'll leave that up to you. If you would read as I speak, or if you just want to close your eyes or listen to what I'm saying, I'm all okay with that. So I'll leave that choice to you. All right, so here I go. So when asking for LNO nominations to fill critical positions, we used 2 criteria. 1, if it doesn't pain you to give the person up, pick someone else. 2, if it's not someone whose voice you'll recognize when they call you at home at 2 a.m., pick someone else. Chicken sandwiches and trash. So that's the name of the chapter. It's also the title of my talk. Lieutenant Commander Conway's reception was chilly. I'd secured judging permission from the country team in the US Embassy in an unstable Middle Eastern country to place a single task force liaison with them to help coordinate the wider effort against Al-Qaeda. But there were clear, understandable reservations when the battle-hardened SEAL officer appeared. So I'm beginning from this underlined section. In his previous tour, he'd worn body armor and night vision goggles to go toe-to-toe with Al-Qaeda fighters in Anbar province, but in his new mission required him to be accepted by his new colleagues. Where Iraq had forced Conway to risk his life, now he decided that he had to subordinate his ego. At his new post, he was initially granted no access to intelligence and given nothing to do. So Conway volunteered to take out the trash. Each afternoon, he went office to office, gathering refuse and carrying it to the dumpster. When he found that one embassy colleague loved Chick-fil-A sandwiches, Conway arranged for the next task force delivery to include several in its contents. A man the US government had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to train as a SEAL was, for 3 months, a glorified garbage man and a fast food delivery boy. But when the situation heated up in the country's capital, the ambassador came to our LNO and asked whether he knew anything about force protection and dealing with the growing Al-Qaeda threat. Our man was exactly where he needed to be. I do, he said. That's what I'm trained in. And I can do you one better. Let me make a call. Soon, the entire weight of the task force enterprise was at the disposal of the intra-agency team at the embassy. Our LNO was there to serve the collective mission, from trash to terrorism. The task force relationship with the country grew tighter nearly instantaneously. A new node in our network came online and began to thrive. Yeah? So that's a little story about Lieutenant Commander Conway. Okay, so show of hands, what are some key lessons for you from this story? Anybody wants to share? I don't have some fancy cupcakes like Thomas did, but I do have some chocolates to offer. Yeah?
So, for me, one of the lessons is when we're engaging with a particular team of people,
Yeah.
You don't always get accepted. And sometimes you have to kind of do things which are not probably what you're meant to do, but that's a way to actually gain the trust.
Wow.
The acceptance.
Brilliant. You earned yourself a chocolate. Sorry for that. Anyone else? Yeah, Lisa?
We sometimes get defined by our roles, and that's especially if you feel like you're moving up. I mean, a Navy SEAL is kind of at the top of that food chain, and it's about coming into a new experience, more of a blank slate, and then picking up what needs to be done in that moment and waiting for the time for some of your capabilities to be needed.
Cool. Brilliant. Love that answer. Anybody has a different perspective?
I think, following on what you said there, that for me sometimes is shared pain. You do the jobs that none of us really want to do, like take the garbage out.
Cool.
What that's done as well as shown by example, and got their trust that you're actually one of us.
Lovely.
So when chips are really down, they'll listen to you because they now trust you.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks a lot for sharing your feedback.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot. Those were some lovely takeaways. A little bit about me. So, hey everyone, I'm Munish. I'm from New Delhi, India, up north of the country. I'm a product consultant at Equal Experts. I like cycling and reading books. I have 2 children, a 7-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old son. Thank you for having me. Let's get started. The ask. So as I was saying initially, the talk is about some lessons from a coaching engagement. So the ask that was put in front of us was coach a strategic cloud platform team to transform behaviors, embed new ways of working, and build their software delivery capability. Well, I don't know about you, but we thought, and it was just two of us, 2 coaches, that these are big words. And they all can mean different things to different people. So we wanted to do a bit of a discovery. Some things that I think typically Equal Experts does at the start of an engagement. So we wanted to spend some time with the teams, do a bit of a discovery, do a bit of a readiness assessment. So we spent a couple of weeks with that platform team to understand about the lay of the land, to see what was really going on. And here's what we found. Well, the first thing what we saw was there were a lot of loud voices floating around, especially to get things done. So what that meant was the stakeholders with connections, or the stakeholders who had an influence or the loudest voices, their demands were getting prioritized. To give you an example, if there was an instance when the head of engineering was kind of accountable to do something for a stakeholder, and so he went in Jira, looked at a story, where that story is, why is it taking so much time, and directly contacted the engineer. So this was the overall, engineering head of their platform division, and directly contacted the engineer and say, hey, what's going on? Why is it taking so much time? And to work in that kind of an environment was not a lot of fun. We also saw that the engineers were far away from the users, and the requirements were actually getting funneled through a layer of hierarchy. So all that meant was there was not a lot of product thinking or conversations around, users or user-centric development that was going on. The lead times are also quite sufficiently long. Within tech, we could see that from the requirement at the start of the development for that to get in production in the hands of the users, it could take anywhere between 12 to 16 weeks. And any guesses what the discovery lead time was? So business having a demand and tech ready, accepting the demand and kind of prioritizing it.
3 months.
Any other guesses?
6 months.
It was amazingly 1 to 2 years. I mean, it was typically 2 years. Maybe once or twice we got to know that things were able to come in a year's time, but it used to take them 2 years to actually, develop something that business was requesting. So things were getting picked up when they had become really, really urgent. All that meant was the focus was on efficiency over effectiveness. And once that happens, it means that we are just making the wrong thing efficient. And when you're in an environment like that, there was a lot of burnout. Hey, no worries. And the teams were getting overworked. As they say, it was a perfect storm. So show of hands, how many of you have seen an engagement having these kind of challenges? Yeah? Anybody else? Yeah?
Not all of them at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to ask the next question. How many of you have seen all of them at the same time? Wow. Cool. So we got some company. We should catch up after the talk. I think what was new over here was that we were just two coaches. We're not coming in with a typical, a delivery team, and our expectation from us was to help improve other people's capability to turn around things. So this was the kind of expression that both of us had, to be honest, and we were wondering what we were actually getting into. Were we confident of the battle that we had, undertaken? So we deliberated about what should be the approach to handle this kind of a case. And we aligned ourselves based on an approach around experimentation. So it's called the test tube approach, something that I learned working with John Dickinson on a previous engagement, and that's something we decided to try out over here. So what does a test tube approach entail? Let's find out. So just like how experiments, especially conducted in a lab, sometimes in a test tube are small and they are time bound. So you try to achieve the outcome of an experiment within a certain period of time. What we wanted to attempt with the team to be time bound. And we wanted to work with a small team. So this was one of the things that we decided to do, rather than the whole platform team, which was over 50 people. We wanted this to be similar to a glass tube exercise. So just like how a test tube or a glass tube is transparent, so the experiment that's going on in a test tube, people could see from outside what's really going on. We wanted to work in a way that anybody who was interested or work in an open space, even if it was remotely, and have avenues where people could see what was really going on and get feedback about the progress. But at the same time, how we can control the environment within a test tube, right? We can control the temperature, we can do some things, control the pressure, and the pressure in a test tube could be very different from the pressure outside. The temperature in the test tube could be very different from the temperature outside. So we wanted this experiment to be protected from the pressures of the organization. And that's the alignment that we got with the leadership. And while doing that, we ensured that we got the permission to try new ways of working. So we got leadership support that yes, there'll be some experiments that are going to go on. Some may not work, some may work, but we need your backing. And lastly, we wanted to prove these new ways of working before we started to scale out to the rest of the platform team. Yeah, make sense so far? Yeah, cool. So this was the approach. Okay, we got a good approach, at least on paper. It looked good to us. It looked good to our sponsors. But then how did we go about it? So today I'll be telling you 2 stories or lessons from that coaching gig. So I'm going to begin with the first one. Quick recap. Still remember the story of Lieutenant Commander Conway, a garbage man, served the collective mission from trash to terrorism. Any new reflections since then? Anyone? That now that you've got a few minutes, anything new that you want to share? All good so far from where we were? You want to say something? No? Cool. All right, so I also want to give credit to Chris Matz. I'm not sure how many of you know. He's from the UK. He's an Agile Transformation Lead. So he introduced me to this book, and it's got a lot of wonderful lessons, things that I use quite often in how I work with teams. So we wanted to find our ways to take out the trash and bring the team the sandwiches, right? We're getting into an environment where there were a lot of loud voices floating around. And we didn't want, as coaches, to be our voices as one of them, right? And this was remote working. So even if we wanted to take out the trash and bring the team the sandwiches, we couldn't really do that. So we had to find our own ways to make the team comfortable with us around them. So the reason we wanted to do that was we wanted to be perceived as very, very approachable people. People with whom the teams feel very safe about. So we wanted to do things in a subtle way. And we decided to help the team in the current context in which they were operating. So whatever they were doing at that point in time, we didn't want to push new ways of working. We didn't want to impose or push or suggest new ways of working, but instead we wanted to support them in whatever they were doing at that point in time. So following some of the examples that we tried, so these were our sandwich bringing moments or taking out the trash moments, where even though we may or may not fully align with some of the things, but we decided to support them in that. So for instance, supporting the Scrum Master in facilitating ceremonies. Scrum Master was struggling and we offered our support, and the Scrum Master was very happy to kind of get a bit of a support in doing that. And the Scrum Master was also looking after several teams, right? You may have heard that a good Scrum Master can look after 2 teams, but a great Scrum Master can look only after 1. And we had a Scrum Master who was looking after several teams. It's quite burnt out. So helping the program manager prepare reports for senior management was not our job, but we decided to do that nevertheless. Spend some time with the program manager, looking after the kind of reports that he was sending and seeing if there's any way in which we could support that. Helping the POs the PO that we had, she was working with a lot of spreadsheets. She had a very spreadsheet way of working, organizing her backlog, drafting stories, things like that. And we decided to help her in the manner in which she was operating. We also started to spend some time with the BAs. BAs were really struggling because the platform needed a lot of tech, needed a tech hat to be on while crafting stories. And we wanted to ensure that we are there for the BAs should they need any support to craft stories. We also started to support developers in solving their problems. So saying we are available for you. If there's anything that we could help you with, we are there. And spending time with the QAs, as I mentioned, there was no safety nets, there was no automation going on. So just trying to work with the QAs, not trying to say do automation, but trying to find out why there was not any automation and trying to empathize with them to build that relationship. So when we started to do all of this, what amazingly started to happen, and we had not planned for this, was people slowly started to open up with us. When we were getting into conversations, we were understanding how vulnerable people were feeling And that explained that when they were having stand-ups or when they were having their meetings or conversations, people were smiling or joking around or having fun. The team members were confiding in us and sharing the pressure over the past couple of years that they've been working under. And some people also broke down. So even though all this was happening, what that meant was it made us kind of agree that yes, seems like we are creating an environment of safety where people feel safe to open up these things with us, to share their vulnerabilities with us. So the outcome of this process, even though we had not planned for it, was that we started to get invited to all the conversations by default where we could help the teams with. So if you see, initially we made ourselves available, and next up, in the next stage of the engagement, we were getting invited to all the conversations without we kind of, asking them to. And that was a big win for us, where teams wanted to engage with us. So with stand-ups, showcases, conversations with the business, they wanted us to be on those calls. And that gave us a little bit of confidence that now it's kind of made the ground fertile enough for the coaching activities to now take place. And the coaching became easier because then it was working in a pull mode. So people wanted to learn more. People wanted to know what are the better ways to craft stories, what are the better ways to write code, what are the better ways to engage with the users. And they wanted to speak to us rather than we doing a lot of lunch and learns, show and tells, things like that. Cool, so we moved to the learning. Would any of you want to share from what I spoke so far, what would be a learning from this first story? Yeah?
That approach, you're enabling people, making them feel empowered, that driving wanting help from you rather than it being forced on them.
Very good point. So the power to change was in their hands. And one thing that we've realized is that once you take control of where you want to go, that's when you get more attached to that process. If the coaches try to tell people things, you may or may not align with it, and then you may not decide that this is resonating with me. But this purely was working in a pull mode where the team were taking control of the pace of the transformation. Great point. Huh? Another chocolate for you, by the way. Thank you. Anyone else? Yeah?
Linking it back to the story that you were reading earlier, the lieutenant put his ego aside.
Correct.
And that's what you guys did. You thought, I'm not going to say I'm a coach and this is all I do. You're going to help the program manager with the, organizing of things and reports and things like that, and just put all of the kind of, set in stone things aside and be more flexible and low ego.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, I think yes. I mean, we wanted to build an environment of safety, and that meant that we kind of. So typically, we are sometimes told, or we see examples where we establish trust by delivering. Right? We deliver, and then we establish trust through that process. But here we felt there's so many loud voices floating around anyway. And if we try to impose things, we'll just be perceived as one of those loud voices who's been implanted by the management onto the team. So we wanted to change that. So thank you. Cool. So yeah, those were some of the learnings, and I've kind of written that it in a way that prioritize building relationships and establish trust to create an environment of safety, especially if you're in a coaching gig. Cool. Now I'll be moving on to the second story, the second lesson from the engagement. Show of hands, any cricket lovers here? I'm not finding many. Yeah? A few. Do people know game of cricket? Yeah? Wow. I was doing a bit of a dry run with a group and they knew nothing about cricket. So this story fell flat. Anyways, imagine a cricketer with a string of low scores. And then he gets told by the team management or the coaching staff that, hey dude, you've been having a series of low scores. I really need to justify your place on the side. There are a lot of good people waiting on the bench. So next time when you go to bat, you know what you got to do. So imagine the thoughts in that person's mind once he goes onto the field, goes to the pitch. Most often than not, he'll be thinking that this time he has to go big, otherwise he's going to lose his place in the side. And a lot of examples, if any of you follow cricket at this point in time, we are seeing these examples even in India's home team, where people are really struggling and due to the kind of pressure that they put on themselves. Have any of you had experience where you yourself or you've seen a student who's not scored well in the examinations? Anyone? Been one. Wonderful. I thought I'll say if you've been one or seen one might have more probability. Okay, cool. And what do you think is an experience when a student who's not been scoring well goes to take exam the next time? What do you think would be going on in his or her mind?
Maybe low on confidence.
Yeah?
Lots of fear and anxiety around the exam.
Absolutely. That and I also think that student was me at some point in time, when going to take that exam, wants to score big. So is doing a lot of studies so that I could score big. But if there are a lot of other students who just, you look at them, they're always smiling, giggling, and just taking the exam and coming out with great results. So what's the difference? Yeah, are you able to resonate with this so far? Yeah. So what do you think is happening here?
You're putting yourself under a lot of pressure when you are expecting a certain outcome from yourself, whereas if you just kind of let go and have fun or take it lightly, you might do better.
Brilliant. Thank you. Exactly. So I think what's happening over there is that constantly thinking about the result, especially when you've had some failures, it puts you under immense pressure. And that was happening with the team that you're working with, that they've had those not able to deliver on time, releases having a lot of bugs, and then constantly those loud voices are imposing the same thing over and over. And then it's not fun anymore. The journey is not fun anymore. So you're studying so that you could get better grades. So the process to study is not fun anymore. You're practicing so that the next time when you go out on the field, you want to score big. So the process of practicing is not fun anymore, because fun will only come once you get the result. Fun will only come when you score big. The process to score big is not fun anymore. The process to get better grades is not fun anymore because you've been experiencing failures. So here are some of the constant chatter in the team, some constant examples in the team around results. Target delivery dates. Hey guys, we got to deliver. Quarterly milestones, yeah, coming up with a quarterly expectation about what all the team will deliver, well, without involving the team, of course. Release deadlines. And naturally, when you're working in such an environment, your releases are not stable. So you release every 3-4 months, and then you work over the weekend to fix that. And your personal goals. Right? Set your personal goals. I'll see every 3 months where you are on your personal goals. And remember the loud voices, right? So all this is happening in an environment where there are a lot of loud voices. This reminded me about this quote by Douglas Adams. Anybody knows who Douglas Adams is?
What about the most annoying one?
Yeah?
With Jira in the morning, when you have to, something's happened, you didn't have time, couldn't make it, everybody's thinking that tick is going to finish the day.
Absolutely. And the head of engineering looking at Jira of a team and trying to figure out who's working on which story and contacting that individual to see where that story is. Any of you know who this guy is? Douglas Adams? Yeah? Yeah, so he's the author of The Hitchhiker's Guide to Galaxy. And I love this quote when it comes to deadlines. From I love deadlines. I love the whooshing noise they make as they go by. So, if focusing on results or targeting outcomes is not the option, what could be an alternative? Anyone knows who this guy is? Yeah? There'll be no chocolates for this. Cool. So he's the ex-captain of the Indian cricket team, ex-captain of Chennai IPL team. He's led Chennai to 4 IPL championships. He's led India to 3 ICC victories. That includes 2 World Cups and an ICC trophy. And I think he's the only captain in the world who's kind of won all 3 championships, all ICC championships as a captain. So let us see what advice he has for us. I hope this works. Oops. We don't have the audio person. The audio is not working. Are you able to hear this?
Of the process, but in today's world, we are so much focused about the result. My only suggestion or advice would be, which I keep saying in all the interviews that I give, process is more important than the result. The result is a byproduct of the process. But in today's world, we are so much focused about the result that we get away from the process. So take care of the process, take care of all the small things, and eventually you'll get the desired result. We always keep complaining, we should have gotten more and all of that, but it's actually the byproduct of what we have done. So if you prepare well, if we execute well, and if we are honest to ourselves, more often than not we'll get the desired result. If there's a shortcoming, it's always a learning. So all the best.
Cool, I'll try to paraphrase. And the thing is that if I try to play around with this, I lose the cursor. So just bear with me.
My only suggestion or advice would be, which I keep saying in all the interviews that I give, process is more important than the result. The result is a byproduct of the process. But in today's world, we are so much focused about the result that we get away from the process. So take care of the process, take care of all the small things, and eventually you'll get the desired result. We always keep complaining, we should have gotten more and all of that, but it's actually the byproduct of what we have done. So if you prepare well, if we execute well, and if you're honest to ourselves, more often than not we'll get the desired result. If there's a shortcoming, it's always a learning. So all the best.
Cool, this slide is behaving funny, but I think you got the gist, right? So Dhoni is trying to say that focus on the little things and let the results be the byproduct of you doing those little things, getting into a bit of good habits, and don't worry too much about the outcome. And should you still not get the outcome, then utilize that as your learning, but focus on the process. I want to quickly skip through this. So we are so much focused on the result that we get away from the process. Take care of the process and the small things. Eventually, you'll get the desired result. So don't focus on the result, really? So as a product person, this did not come naturally to me. Does it sound controversial to you as well? How many of you are able to make peace with this? Yeah? Wow. So I'm still somewhere in the middle, right? So I needed more data, to be honest, to be able to come and say this in the talk. So I started to look for the data, but coincidentally, I bumped into this book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. Any of you have read this? Yeah, lovely book, isn't it? So of course, he talks about the transformation power of tiny habits. And the book is amazing. He gives so many examples about the process and the tiny habits. But the section that I wanted to pick from this book, I'll not do more book reading, but I'll just bring out the section for you. So he's got a little section at the start of the book that talks about what happens when we focus on the results and the outcomes, and what are the problems with it. So he says, forget about the goals, focus on the systems instead. And then he talks about some problems that happen if we think too much about the goals. If you're aligning our ways of working because you want to achieve certain goals, there are some problems with it. Let's see what those problems are. And what are the problems about doing kind of goal-oriented work? Problem number 1 is, winners and losers have the same goals. Think about it, right? Whether it's an Olympic race or it's anything that we're doing, to be honest, if we're in a state where we're kind of competing examinations, everybody wants to score good grades. Everybody wants to win the medal. But we somehow have been programmed to say, SMART goals, SMART, right? Specific, measurable, all of that. So have SMART goals and you'd be the winner. So we got a bit of a survivorship bias over there. Achieving the same goal is only a momentary change. And it gives example of, let's say you've had a busy day, and your desk or your room is in a bit of a mess. So you clean up the room. The next day, at the end of the day, your desk and your room is still messy. So we achieved the goal, but then it's only a momentary change. We get back to the old state. And goals restrict your happiness, right? We spoke about it earlier. If I climb the mountain, if I reach on the top, then I'll be happy. So while I'm climbing, I'm just focusing on achieving my goals so that I can be happy. I want to win the marathon. I want to deliver the release so that my product manager or my program manager is proud of me. So doing all these things so that we can achieve our goals, which is kind of restricting the happiness along the way. So the process is no more your things that's giving you happiness. And lastly, goals are at odds with long-term progress. So won the marathon, what do I do next? That was my long-term goal, I've done that. So you've not kind of fallen in love with the process, but instead kind of getting obsessed on the end goal is when these things start to happen. So James Clear shares some examples. So for example, if you're a coach and if your goal is to help the team win a championship, then what you should instead be focusing on is the process of building the right team, inculcating the right practices, getting the right talent. If you're an entrepreneur who wants to build $1 million business, then if that's your goal, but your focus should then be running the right experiments, getting some key takeaways, identifying what your MVP will be. So you're doing these little things, but let those kind of things be the final goal, but you're not kind of focusing and or getting obsessed about it or doing all those things at the start. So how did we go about it? So we started to focus on the little things. It sounds quite simple. Let's see if it really is. So what did that mean when we said that we wanted to focus on the little things and not be too much worried about what the outcome of these things will be? We started to pick some practices one at a time. And we kept doing that over and over, sometimes for several weeks, only doing the same new thing until it becomes a bit iterative, so that we've done that today, and when we'll do it tomorrow, we'll do it slightly better, and we'll keep doing it better, and we do that every day until it becomes a bit of a habit, until it becomes the default way in which the team wants to operate. And the key thing here is that you got to do that only one thing at a time, not several things all happening at the same time. So this is the reason we were doing these things, but what did we do? So the first thing what we realized was, once we spent some time with the team, everybody had their own interpretation of how the work was flowing between columns and between various states. So the BA had their own interpretation of at what point in time they pick up the story. The devs had their own interpretation of, okay, if this all is written in the story, then I can pick that story up. The QAs had their own interpretation of that's when the stories are ready for QA to get tested. So that's how everybody was having their own interpretation, and what that was leading to was leading a lot of back and forth. So it used to get tested, error, go back. Story starts developing, doesn't have the requirement, go back. So people were seeing a lot of these loops within the board. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to get the policies that we started to call them as explicit policies out, that everybody builds a shared understanding about what's the entry criteria and what's the exit criteria when they start to work on a story in a particular state. Right. So what that meant was we did some workshop, everybody comes up with their own inputs, and then we draft with every column a clear entry and a clear exit criteria, that only once that exit criteria is met is when the story will go to the next stage. We started to intensify the refinement efforts. Again, it sounds very simple, but we kept doing that, as I said, until the stories became very, very small. Now, yes, there is probably a bit of a conundrum that should we make the story small enough that they don't, sometimes a very small story may not deliver value. But considering the team, where the team was, we started to prioritize size of the story, as long as collectively a couple of stories were delivering that value. But we wanted every story to be small and similarly sized, so that there's a constant flow of stories on the board, and every story could get delivered in maximum 2 to 3 days. And that was the target. And we kept doing that. We kept doing that days after days, weeks after weeks, until that it became a bit of an habit, that's the default way in which the team operates. There were a lot of handoffs. There were a lot of invisible walls that were there. So we wanted to ensure that the teams come together and they work together, getting the dev, the QA, and the BA all working together, and that's a bit of a three amigos. Paul is giving me a time check, so I'll try to finish through these last couple of slides. We started working more closely with our users, so started having more conversations with our users. They were finally getting heard, right? And they were able to give feedback about what really mattered to them. And before the stories were getting deployed to production, we were involving the users again so that they could see what we are about to give it to them, and we could get their feedback. Specification by example, that was another new practice that we incorporated, where the acceptance criteria started to get written using real life examples. So rather than just words, sometimes when you supplement your words with real examples is when people are able to make more sense with it. So that was another thing that we tried. Cool. What was the outcome when we did all of that? You may ask. Right? Because we were not focusing on the outcomes. We were just doing this. And that's the truth. We were just doing these little things. We were not focusing on the outcome. But yet, outcomes are important. We all know that. But interestingly, somebody else was measuring our outcome. Who was that? That was the client's exec sponsor. So he ran a few reports to see how this team is doing at the end of the experiment. And interestingly, we got a 40% reduction in lead time. And he sent a mail to our engagement manager, congratulating the work that we've done so far, which kind of gave a 40% reduction in lead time. It was huge, if you ask. The victories that we were more proud of as coaches was the other intangible things. Like, we could see people smiling, we could see stand-ups getting more fun, we could see the demos becoming more fun, and the leadership not getting, meddling in how kind of the work is happening on the team, and they were content. So there was a bit of positive energy in the team and outside the team, and that as coaches we felt very good about. So what was the learning? I'll quickly finish my slides now. So one learning that we got from the second story was that if you're looking to improve behavioral skills, and that's how I made peace with not focusing on the results part, that if you're in a position where you need to help the team improve their skills or change their behaviors, then don't focus on the goals. Instead, focus on the process or the systems. Scott Adams, who is the cartoonist of Dilbert, so he's written a lot of things and you can find on the internet about goals and systems, and he says goals are about the results that you want to achieve, and systems are about the processes that lead to the results, right? Similar to what Dhoni said, they kind of focus on the processes, and that's how you achieve those results. And when we focus on doing the little things repeatedly, consistently, over a period of time, when it becomes a habit, that's how the big things get taken care of. That was a key big learning that we got from the initiative. Well, finally, our jaws were still dropped, but we were smiling. That's my time. Thank you so much, everyone.